Welcome to the fourth of 6 short videos on the 6-point pattern of the anti-Aristotelians. Let's go now to point 3 of the anti-Aristotelian pattern, submission to some alleged greater consciousness. As an example, we see here thousands of Germans submitting themselves to Adolf Hitler. Do you see how these points begin to tie together? These 6 points are not random. So far we've seen give up your mind, adopt the arbitrary, and now submit to some other consciousness other than your own. From Ayn Rand, a quote on consciousness. Consciousness is the faculty of awareness, the faculty of perceiving that which exists. That means your 5 senses. If you submit to some other consciousness other than your own, you give up your mind, your life, your happiness, your values, and your rights. Jesus said, "For your heavenly Father knoweth that ye have need of all these things." The message is, you don't have to know. Again from Augustine, man owes not to his own will, but to that of God. Knowledge is a result of God, not man's own volition in this view. Volition is the choice to think or not. From the Koran, we have, quote, "I have submitted myself as a Muslim to the Lord of Alamin, of mankind, of jinn, and all that exists." We have a prayer of forgiveness from Allah, quote, "You created me, and I am your slave." And to be obedient to Allah, fear Him, and to be dutiful to Him. As most of you likely already know, Islam literally means submission to the will of God. In this case, Allah. Thus, submit your consciousness, surrender your means of perceiving, obliterate your senses. We have more obliteration of your senses. That is your consciousness, your means of awareness, with Immanuel Kant. He says, the true thing in itself remains unknown. We believe we see the real world, but in Kant's view, what we really see is the phenomenal world, not the real world. And in his view, there's only a priori. That is, before we've experienced non-empirical and non-experiential knowledge, which somehow you obtain or is revealed to you. Your consciousness, that is your method of awareness, is invalid according to Kant. Marx only disregards the idea of a greater revelatory consciousness. He disregards, in Kantian fashion, the idea of any individual consciousness. What is stunning is that he makes these statements in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, which is the greatest opportunity for work and wealth for humans in all of history up to that point. Quote, "The wage laborer merely suffices to prolong and reproduce a bare existence," from the Communist Manifesto. Quote, "He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, most easily acquired knack that is required of him." Again, Marx from the Manifesto. So what should the passive individual worker do? Working men of the world, of all countries, unite. Again, Marx is not explicitly philosophical, but you can infer the principles involved with his statements. You have no individual consciousness in his view. You can't make it on your own, implies Marx. So give up your mind to the social consciousness, the communist revolution. Note the religious mystical use of the language of Adolf Hitler, a definite political faith, from Mein Kampf. If you give up your consciousness and rely on faith, what will take its place? An alleged greater consciousness. We have from Hitler that one man must step forward who with apodictic, meaning absolute certain force, will form granite principles. And what must this one man do? He must move from the shifting waves of free thought world. There will be a rise in the brazen cliff of solid unity in faith and will. That's Hitler from Mein Kampf. In Hitler's view, individuals can't fully comprehend truths, but one man must step forward with certain force and will create a solid unity of alleged truth in faith and will. And of course, he considers himself that man. Okay, point 4, the demand to follow rules or commands from that alleged greater consciousness we just described. And here's the Communist Manifesto, for example. Note the wording of the commands here from the Communist Manifesto: abolition, confiscation, centralization, production owned by the state, establishment of industrial armies, all because the passive, mindless, meek individual worker is arbitrarily asserted to be a slave. Thus, the social consciousness must take over, in Marx's view. Here are the commands from Hitler's program: only those of German blood. The aim of the school must be to give the pupil a grasp of the nation of the state. The common interest comes before self-interest. And we demand the creation of a strong central state power for the Reich. Again, we have the one man declaring with certain force in regard to mystical views of race and of the common interest, that is the social consciousness, the state is the means to the end to gain racial purity. We have arbitrary rules and commands from the Koran. If you read the Koran, you see there's no attempt at persuasion. They are simply commanded and thus arbitrary. The rules cover a long list of items, as you see on the screen: manners, clothing, divorce, sex, and so on. Here's a quote. The Prophet said to perform the daily compulsory salat, which is prayers, and to participate in jihad in Allah's cause. And that's the end of this video. We'll now move to the next video and complete the 6-point pattern of the anti-Aristotelians.